I now request Ipsita Sardarji to come for her session, which is on prevarication in Panchatantra as seen through a linguistic lens. Ipsita ji is a postgraduate, first year student of Jadavpur University. Her previous research has been in sociolinguistics, which lies on folk literature, folk culture, and it's related to medieval Bengali literature, Mangalgan, which is associated with pan-Indian deity or local Bengali deity. Her current work is concerned about linguistic effects on people in social structure and linguistic aspects on the developments of neuroscience. She has a very strong academic background, and she has some very interesting things to say about Panchatantra. Over to Ipsita ji.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Ipsita from Kolkata. I'm a postgrad student of linguistics. So today we are going to discuss the traditional Indian folk literature Panchatantra via linguistic aspects. My paper is Prevarication in Panchatantra as seen through the linguistic lens. Here, these are the contents of today's discussion. Before we go into the topic, we have to know what is what. So, what is the folk culture and literature? All I can say, the word folk culture is a combination of two different words, folk and culture. People means people or people and culture in the excellence of civilization. Folk literature and stories are transmitted by words of mouth. So, folk literature contains prose and verse narratives, poems and songs, myths, dramas, rituals, proverbs, riddles, etc. Formulas in words and in structure, realism in tale or song, violent actions, and simple, strong emotions. These qualities are generally found in all folk literature here. As the folk literature contains the mirror image of society, the purpose is to teach a lesson or to describe characteristics of one's culture. The folk culture reflects the civilized excellence of the society and reveals the way of life. We all know that literature is one of the main components of any society and culture. Literature is the medium that connects folk life. Folk literature and storytelling are the creation of the basis of individual consciousness. On the other hand, it is the overall life-sustaining creation of a society as a whole. Let's focus on the topic. We are picking one of the popular Indian folk literature, Panchatantra. As written in the book, Vishnu Sharma wrote Panchatantra for the purpose of teaching morals to three inexperienced sons of Amashakti, the king of the Mahilarupya Nagar of the Deccan. As it was written for moral learning, clearly the book has a deep impact on society. The book, being composed of 5 tantras of morals, was called Panchatantra. It is an ancient Indian collection of interrelated animal fables in Sanskrit verse and prose, arranged within a frame story. We can say that animals' fables that are as old as we are able to imagine. The 5 tantras are Mitra Veda, dissonance among friends or the loss of friends; Mitra Prapti, achievement of friends or the winning of friends; Kakolukyam, the story of war of crows and the owls; Labdha Pranasha, loss of what was attained; and the last one is Aparikshita Karakam, to do without pre-examination or considered action. Each tantra has a number of short stories attached to it. The first attached photo is a page from Kelile Odimne, from a Persian translation of the Panchatantra, derived from the actually it's an Arabic version, Kalila Vadimna. The second photo here, attached with the presentation, It is the first page of the oldest surviving Panchatantra text in Sanskrit. Here, 3 questions arise in this paper. Now, I only can say that the imaginary stories are diversely written in simple language and they fully contain poetic function. On the reflection of Panchatantra as folklore in Indian literature, it is necessary to refer to the study of linguistics where subjective terms keep recurring. We have to examine the meaning of the terms and their applications. In relation to the study of social linguistics, it appeared necessarily to consider literary theories like prevarication and poetic function. To me, Panchatantra is a perfect example of sociolinguistic prevarication. So, what are the main tools of storytelling here? The first one is plot. The plot is the most important part of any story. It defines the story is all about, what the audience will experience. The second one is here the characters. Characters are the elements who are living in the story. These are the elements whose actions determine the flows of the plot. And the last one is here the theme. Theme has a great influence on the way the plot is being perceived. Surrounding of a story gives direct support to the character traits and gives an opportunity for the audience to understand the underlying motivations and fear. Now, we'll see as a story how appropriate Panchatantra is. Storytelling is a vivid description of ideas, beliefs, personal experiences, and life lessons through stories or narratives that evoke powerful emotions and insights. The position of fiction covers a large part of Sanskrit literature. In fiction, the narrator incarnates a principal sentence by narrating the story. This helps the imagination to be a kind of truth in our society. Storytelling of Panchatantra describes the social and cultural activity of sharing stories, sometimes with improvisation, theatrics, and embellishment. So, what is prevarication? Charles F. Hockett proposed that linguistics can be seen as a game and as a science. In the paper, a note on structure. Every language is an open system. It allows us to express things we haven't seen before. Prevarication comes with the idea that it is not mandatory to tell the truth. Rather, this is our ability to lie. We can relate this feature with storytelling. The power to lie is the backbone of the narration of folklore. In this figure, we can see that morals are derived via stories with the help of imagination and lie. The process is called prevarication here. There's a linguistic connection between the narrator and the audience. The prevarication of the story is making differences in the thought of a listener. From ancient times, people have had a natural fascination with stories. This helps the imagination to be a kind of truth in our society. Basically, from the earlier time, imagination and the power to lie are specialties of human revolution. Everyone, young and old, loves to tell stories. Storytelling in one of the ways to relax. People talk to friends for the purpose of calming and the burdened mind. Above all, stories are needed to attract children. Even at a tender age, there is a natural appeal of storytelling to a child's mind. Storytellers are engaged in writing fictions about these aspects of human instinct. As a result, one of the reasons behind the creation of fiction is leisure, recreation, children's education, and the most important thing, moral education. With a universal appeal, the storyteller creates an enchanting atmosphere that appears at the doorstep of children's mind with a flurry of fairy tales. As a result, the storyteller enjoys an extreme freedom in character creation. The storyteller is in fact a real social educator, serving the twists and turns of life's useful principles and ideas. In this paper, I have shown the features of Panchatantra as a folklore. These features help us to prove prevarication and its aspects on society. The next point is, what is poetic function? An element of linguistics. Poetic function focuses on the message for its own sake, and it is the operative function in poetry or stories. According to Jacobson, the poetic function focuses the readers or listeners more than other linguistic functions to attend to the signifiers in linguistic science, away from the signifieds. Also, folklore and folktales are the cultural bridging element between the addresser and the addressee. Considering the storytelling process as a function of language, Panchatantra is potentially an example of Jacobson's poetic function. Here, Jacobson's poetic function is basically a message-oriented communication. In utterance, in literary texts, the poetic function is dominant. The language tends to be more opaque than conventional prose in emphasizing the signifier and medium and their materiality, or the form, style, quote, etc. At least as much as any signified contained message or referential meaning. We can say that folklore is a special form of oral folk art which gives a general idea of the structure of world and human community in oral images. Literary writing is perceived as an art form and is reflected in a person's inner world is the system of social relation developed within a certain historical period. The whole thing is dependent on poetic function. Words of Panchatantra have their own special artistic abilities, facial expressions, gestures, voices, tendencies, and other ways that literature cannot or doesn't need to use. The folk literature oriented from the beginning of language creation. The spreading of Panchatantra became possible just because of its power to be perception and poetic function. Here in the chart, I can show you the storyteller to the listener, the journey of storyteller to listener by the poetic function. Let's talk about a little bit of sociolinguistics here. There is no doubt that folklore contains several morals and cultures of society. Thus, it is a cornerstone of sociolinguistics. The collection of folk art is, first of all, a community of generations, which manifests itself at different levels. Literature is the mirror of human life. Everything in society, nature, or the human world is reflected in literature. From the auspiciousness of the creation of literature in ancient times, the interest to see his life in literature was born in man. We expect a healthy value from the various relationships bound up in human life, where there will be streams of heart, purity, support, sympathy, etc. All of them are carried by folk fictions. The Panchatantra is one of the most notable names in ancient Indian fiction. There are various social issues such as which path to take in life, which path to avoid, right, wrong, and true, false feelings, to have or not to have a relationship with man according to his characteristics, establishment of religion, destruction of iniquity, etc. Folklore is not the setting of any individual. It is a symbol of creativity of ordinary people in society. It's a whole creation. Folk literature, created from the world and life, gradually finds new forms in the creation of people. Panchatantra was relevant to that time, also relevant to this age. Gradually, the moral containing stories can be called classic literature as they are useful and relevant to all the ages. Here we can see in the chart the folk stories that are containing morals. In the change of time, they are becoming written stories, but the folk story was relevant in that time and relevant is in this time also, and relevant to all ages. That's why it is becoming a classic literature. In the change of time, still they are containing morals. So in last, we can say Panchatantra is not only the most notable folk literature, it is also the greatest. Story is a feature of language creation of human imagination. The imagination gives us the power to create faithful lives. These lives become a part of our life. We all accept the feature of language, prevarication, as our daily important way to living. So, Panchatantra also contains the design feature. Poetic function helps us to believe the imagination as truth and also helps us to sense the main motive of folklore and folktales. Basically, the creation of folk stories is for teaching people the proper way of life. The language of Panchatantra is simple, straightforward, and clear. Vishnu Sharma didn't burden the language. That's why it can teach people in a simplified way. As an ancient folk literature, Panchatantra can be a perfect example of poetic function. Folk cultural stories are basically created upon myth and myth related morals. These morals are relevant to society, and every person is getting familiar to various different cultures of society via these folklore and folktales. So, Panchatantra is one of the ancient folklore collection of India, and it has notable aspects on human society and civilization. That's all. These are the references, and this is the acknowledgement of the paper. Thank you very much.